It all started with a lie so small, it could have slipped through the cracks unnoticed. "I'm just heading to the store, babe. Need anything?" Those were his words. Simple, casual. He kissed my forehead, grabbed his keys, and vanished out the door like he always did. But that night, something in me shifted. Call it intuition, a gut feeling, whatever you want. But I knew, in that moment, he wasn't going to the store, not even close. My name is Ava Mitchell. I was the kind of wife who made homemade pasta on Sundays and knew the scent of my husband's cologne by heart. We were married for 10 years. 10 years of what I thought was loyalty, love, and unshakable trust. I gave up a lot to support his career. Late nights, raising our daughter mostly on my own, putting my dreams on hold, while he built our future. I was all in. I believed in us. But that night, as I watched his taillights disappear down the driveway, something didn't sit right. I walked back into the kitchen, staring blankly at the bag of groceries I'd just unpacked. He hadn't taken the list I left on the counter. He hadn't asked about dinner. And his eyes, when he looked at me, felt distant, like he was already somewhere else. I didn't want to believe it at first. I even told myself I was overthinking. But curiosity has a way of gnawing at you when something's off. I picked up my phone, hesitated for a moment, and then opened the GPS tracking app we had on each other's phones for safety. Something we installed after his business trips had gotten more frequent. His idea, ironically. And there it was. He wasn't at the store. He was parked outside a condo on the other side of town, an address I didn't recognize. I stared at the blinking dot on my screen. Heart pounding, breath shallow, blood cold. My fingers trembled as I zoomed in. That wasn't a grocery store. That was her place. I didn't know who she was yet, but I knew someone was there. Someone who had what I didn't. His attention, his lies, his betrayal. The moment was surreal. It felt like the floor had cracked beneath me, and I was free falling into a world I didn't recognize. My husband, the man who told me I was his, everything, who held my hand through miscarriages and mortgages, was cheating on me. And the worst part? He had been doing it so effortlessly, so shamelessly. I sat down, the room spinning. The sound of the refrigerator hummed too loud in the silence. I wanted to scream, cry, punch something. But instead, I sat still, quiet, numb, because I knew something else then. Something even more powerful than the betrayal. I wasn't going to confront him that night. I wasn't going to cry and beg and ask why. That's what he expected. That's what she probably expected too. But they had no idea who I really was. They had no idea I could play the long game. If he wanted to lie to me, if he wanted to race everything we built like it was nothing, like I was nothing, then I was going to make sure his little fantasy crumbled, piece by piece. Not with screaming or slashing tires. No, that would have been too easy, too expected. I was going to dismantle him the way he tried to dismantle me. Quietly, cleverly, completely. And it all started with one simple truth. He thought I was home making dinner. But in reality, I had just stepped into his world, and I was about to tear it apart. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't come all at once. It seeps in slowly, poisoning every memory you thought was safe. Over the next few days, I became someone I never thought I'd be. I became calculated. I watched him, studied him, traced his every move. I smiled when he came home late and lied, through his teeth. Sorry, the store was packed. Got caught up at the office. Grabbed a drink with Ben. Ben, who hadn't spoken to him in months. It was all unraveling. Every excuse was a thread, and I pulled at each one until the fabric of his lies came apart in my hands. He thought I was oblivious. Maybe I'd been too trusting before, too eager to believe that love meant loyalty. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Not after seeing the location history from the last 2 months. He'd been visiting that condo regularly, always late, always for just under 2 hours, like it was some twisted routine. And then came the texts. One night while he showered, I picked up his phone. The password hadn't changed. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. There she was, Cassandra. Her name glowed at the top of the message thread like a slap in the face. Blonde. 27. A yoga instructor, apparently. According to her Instagram, which I scrolled through with cold, detached focus, she posted inspirational quotes under half-naked selfies and referred to my husband as her forever flame in captions dated while we were celebrating our anniversary. She didn't know about me. That much was clear. He had spun her some story, probably that I was a crazy ex, or separated, or maybe just a roommate. He was good at that. He'd always been a storyteller. But what gutted me the most wasn't just that he was cheating. It was how meticulously he'd built this double life. There were secret credit cards, one under a business name I'd never heard of, hidden receipts from hotels, dinners, weekend trips. He was funding their fantasy life with money that should have gone toward our mortgage, our daughter's college savings. When I confronted our financial planner about a missing investment account, he hesitated, then admitted that Chase had pulled $18,000 from one of our joint savings accounts for a business investment, one I'd never been told about because it never existed. I was furious, but even more than that, I was hurt. This wasn't some drunken one-night mistake. This was a life he was choosing to build, day after day, while looking me in the eye and calling me his world. I began to question everything. Every I love you, every quiet Sunday morning, every smile he gave our daughter. Was any of it real? But the worst moment came when I looked into my daughter's eyes and realized I'd have to tell her someday that her father had abandoned us emotionally long before he ever walked out the door, that the man she idolized was nothing more than a polished lie. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't just file for divorce, split everything down the middle, and let him skip off into the sunset with his side piece and my savings. He had wrecked our marriage. He had robbed our future. He had lied to our child. No, this wasn't going to be one of those stories where the woman cries in court and the man walks away, half-heartedly apologizing. I wasn't going to be his footnote. I wanted justice, not just legally, but emotionally. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he'd done, to lose the comfort of his secrets, to watch his shiny new fantasy world crumble, the way mine had. But first, I had to know everything. I needed proof. I needed to gather the weapons he never expected me to wield. Because the storm was coming, and I was done being silent. This wasn't just about a man cheating on his wife. This was about everything he had stolen from me. The years, the trust, the life I had poured into a marriage that turned out to be a lie. But more than that, it was about the future he thought he could casually rewrite without my consent. The future of our daughter, our home, our financial stability, our name. Chase, my husband, wasn't just unfaithful. He was dangerous in his arrogance. He thought he could do all this behind my back and walk away clean, untouched, unscathed. He thought I was too soft, too loyal, too dependent to fight back. But he had no idea who he was messing with. Because here's the thing. I had given up a lot for this marriage. My career as a graphic designer was thriving before I stepped back to raise our daughter and support Chase's business endeavors. He said it was just for a few years, until he got things stable, that he'd take care of me, that I'd never have to worry. But now I was worried, because I was starting to realize just how far he'd gone to isolate me financially. Accounts I thought we shared had been rerouted in his name only. The house deed, amended 2 years ago, without my signature. The car I drove, leased under his LLC. It was also intentional, and now that I was beginning to look closer, I saw it wasn't just betrayal. It was a strategy. He had been planning to leave, not abruptly, not some romantic whirlwind that swept him off his feet into another woman's arms. No, this was cold, methodical. like I was a contract. He was quietly terminating behind the scenes while smiling across the dinner table. But what really broke me, what shattered every last illusion I was holding on to, was hearing our daughter, Lily, ask one night, "Why does Daddy always leave after dinner now? Doesn't he like being home anymore?" I had to bite the inside of my cheek so hard, I tasted blood just to keep myself from sobbing. She was only 8, and already she could feel the weight of his absence. That's when I knew I couldn't just protect myself. I had to protect her. This wasn't just my heart that had been torn open. This was her childhood being rewritten by a man who thought nothing of sneaking out after bedtime kisses to lay in someone else's bed. And I wasn't going to let that slide. I started documenting everything, every lie, every missing dollar, every location ping. I backed up his messages, screenshotted bank statements, photographed receipts. I created a folder on a hidden drive labeled Life Insurance, so he'd never think to check. I consulted a lawyer, quietly, explained the financial manipulation, the adultery, the emotional abandonment. She told me what I already feared. If I didn't act fast, he'd find a way to strip me of everything and walk away with a smile. So, I made a promise to myself. I would not be left picking up the broken pieces while he played house with a woman half his age. I would not be the sad, discarded wife, clinging to memories. I would become the woman he never saw coming. And I wouldn't just survive this. I would win. Not for revenge alone, but for justice. For my daughter. For every woman who's been blindsided by the person they trusted most. This mattered because I mattered. And because no one gets to burn down my life and walk away unscathed. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But what they don't tell you is that it's also best served carefully, with precision, patience, and a razor-sharp mind. I didn't want to just blow up his life in a fit of rage. I wanted him to feel the slow, creeping dread of being found out. I wanted him to lose control, to watch the world he built on lies begin to rot from the inside. But first, I needed to know the full scope of the damage. So I started with what I knew best: information. I took 2 weeks off work under the guise of needing a mental health break. In reality, I spent every day piecing together Chase's double life. I hired a private investigator. She wasn't cheap, but she was good. She followed him, tracked his locations, gathered photo evidence, and even caught him leaving Cassandra's condo on a Thursday night, smiling like the kind of man who thought he'd gotten away with everything. Next came the finances. I dug through our joint accounts and discovered he'd funneled nearly $30,000 into a private brokerage under his business alias. The worst part, some of it came from our daughter's education fund. I froze the remaining assets immediately. My lawyer helped me file a motion to block any further withdrawals until the divorce proceedings could begin. Yes, divorce. That was the end game, but not yet. First, I needed to get everything lined up. Custody, asset control, evidence. I needed leverage, because Chase, being the arrogant man he is, would fight to keep his reputation squeaky clean. His business thrived on his public image. He was a family man, a devoted father, a loyal husband. That was the brand he sold to investors, clients, and social media followers. He would never risk that. So I created a new plan, one that hit him where it hurt most: his ego. Step 1. Collect proof of the affair. Already done, thanks to the PI's crystal clear photos and a neat little USB drive of his text conversations with Cassandra. Screenshots from his own phone I'd saved months earlier, labeled with dates and timestamps. Step 2. Control the narrative. I created a fake email account under an alias and reached out to several of his business contacts with an anonymous tip. You might want to reconsider associating with someone currently under investigation for financial misconduct and infidelity. The truth always comes out. I didn't name him. I didn't have to. Just enough of a whisper to plant the seed of doubt. Step 3. Legal leverage. I filed for divorce, quietly, strategically. My lawyer filed for temporary sole custody and a full audit of our financial records, since I had evidence of Chase's infidelity, his misappropriation of funds, and potential fraud using our joint accounts. The court would be on my side. Step 4. Exposure. This was the most delicate part. I created a private website, password protected, and uploaded every piece of evidence. Photos, texts, receipts, documents, a neat digital file labeled The Truth. It wasn't public, not yet, but it was ready, because if he tried to smear me, tried to twist the story in court or in front of our daughter, I would have my trump card. And finally, step 5, confront Cassandra. I wasn't going to threaten her. I wasn't even angry at her. Not really. She was just another one of his lies. But she deserved to know the truth too. I mailed her a copy of the evidence, anonymously. Let her see what kind of man Chase really was. Let her realize that while she was planning Pilates retreats and candlelit dinners, he was gutting his wife's financial security and lying to his child's face. I wasn't out for blood. I was out for justice. And I wasn't going to get it by screaming or crying. I was going to get it by being smarter, calmer, and 5 steps ahead. Chase thought he had me cornered. But what he didn't realize was, I wasn't in checkmate. I was just setting up the board. Once the plan was set, it was time to act. And with every step I took, I could feel the balance of power shifting. Slowly, steadily, the control Chase had stolen from me was coming back into my hands. But I didn't rush it. I knew better than to strike too soon. Timing was everything. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a dismantling of a carefully manufactured lie. I started with gathering solid proof, legally. I backed up everything to a secure cloud folder and printed hard copies of key documents. Photos from the private investigator, credit card statements showing hotel stays and luxury dinners, while he claimed he was working late. Text messages where he promised Cassandra a new life together. Even emails where he discussed transferring funds from our joint account into his business without my knowledge. Each piece was labeled, dated, and filed. If he tried to deny any of it, I'd have a paper trail long enough to bury him in court. Tip 1. Document everything, even if you think it's minor. Small patterns tell big stories. A dinner receipt at a hotel 5 miles from Cassandra's condo. That's not coincidence. It's corroboration. Next! I met with my lawyer again, this time with everything in hand. We filed a temporary financial restraining order. It froze all marital accounts and prevented him from selling, transferring, or borrowing against our assets until the divorce proceedings were settled. We also filed for temporary full custody, citing emotional neglect, financial manipulation, and adultery, all supported by documented evidence. Tip 2. Don't wait for them to make the first move. Get ahead of the legal process. Courts don't and care about drama. They care about proof and preparation. My lawyer said it best. It's not about who yells the loudest. It's about who shows up with receipts. Then I quietly began rebuilding my independence. I opened my own bank account in a new institution, changed the passwords to everything. Email, phone backups, even my social media. I updated my resume, contacted former clients from my graphic design work, and started freelancing again under a new business name. It wasn't just about money. It was about freedom. Every dollar I earned was a step out of his shadow. Tip 3. Create your own financial safety net. Even if you think you won't need it. Freedom is having options, and I wanted every option on the table. Then came Lily, our daughter. I didn't want her caught in the crossfire, but I also wouldn't allow Chase to keep up his act as a doting father while living a lie. I started documenting every missed school event, every late pickup, every time he prioritized Cassandra over his daughter. I also enrolled Lily in therapy, someone trained to help children navigate parental separation and betrayal. Tip 4. Protect your child emotionally, not just legally. The courts will see it, and more importantly, your child will feel it. She'll know who really stood by her when everything was falling apart. And finally, I started planting the seeds that would eventually expose him. I reached out to a few mutual friends, not with drama or bitterness, but with honesty. I think you deserve to know what's really going on, I said. Then I showed them the proof. I didn't have to say much more. People talk, and Chase's perfect image. It began to fracture, quietly, subtly. The pity he expected never came. Instead, he began to get side-eyed at work functions. Clients grew cold. Friends stopped inviting him to dinners. Cassandra's Instagram went quiet. No more soulmate posts. Tip 5. Never underestimate the power of quiet truth. You don't need to scream to destroy a lie. Just expose it and let it rot in the light. The beauty of it all was, Chase still had no idea. He still walked through the door each night pretending everything was normal. Still kissed Lily goodnight and sent Cassandra good morning texts, thinking he was the master of his universe. But he didn't know the foundation was already crumbling. The truth was closing in, and I was ready. Because the next move would be the final one. The day everything came crashing down wasn't stormy or dramatic. It was a bright, ordinary Tuesday. The kind of day Chase thought would go on forever. The kind where he could keep up his lies, play house with his mistress, and still come home to a wife who folded his laundry. But that morning, I didn't make him coffee. I didn't say goodbye as he left for work with a kiss on the cheek and a lie in his mouth. Instead, I walked into our lawyer's office and signed the papers. Everything was ready. The evidence was submitted, custody arrangements filed, accounts frozen, reputation in slow, quiet ruins. Cassandra, she'd already ghosted him. The evidence I sent her must have been enough, because her social media vanished and her apartment lease was suddenly terminated. She left him before I even got the chance to. By the time Chase got home that evening, something had shifted. I was calm, ice cold, but calm. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply handed him the envelope. He opened it, probably expecting some bill or house document. Instead, he found everything: the texts, the receipts, the photographs, the court orders, and right on top, a note in my handwriting. You told me you were at the store. I knew you were with her. So I stopped waiting for the truth, and I found it myself. For the first time in all this, he was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes before a lie. No, this was stunned, cornered, caught, and it was glorious. I can explain, he stammered, his face losing all color. I held up a hand. No, you can't, and more importantly, I don't care anymore. I watched him crumble, page by page, as he flipped through the evidence, watching the life he built on lies collapse beneath him, realizing that every card he thought he held was now mine. I'll lose everything, he whispered, as if he was the victim here. No, I said softly. You're just finally paying for what you did. That's not loss. That's karma. The next few weeks moved fast. The courts ruled in my favor. I got full custody of Lily, with Chase granted supervised visitation until further review. The judge didn't take kindly to financial manipulation or evidence of an extramarital affair, especially one that involved misusing funds meant for our daughter's education. His business took a hit too. That whisper campaign? It had reached all the right ears. Several clients backed out. One even filed a complaint. His perfect public image, gone. And since Cassandra had skipped town and left him on red, he had no one to run to when the world turned on him. But me, I felt free for the first time in years. I moved out of that house full of ghosts and rented a sunny little place where Lily and I painted our rooms any color we wanted. I launched my freelance business under my own name and started getting real clients again. Clients who respected me. Clients who knew my worth. And every night, when I tucked my daughter into bed, She looked at me with eyes full of trust, full of peace. "Mommy," she said one night, "I like it better here. It feels like we're safe." We were, because I fought for it. I didn't just survive betrayal, I turned it into power. And Chase? He still tries now and then. Sends empty apologies, passive-aggressive texts. Once, he even dropped off a bouquet of lilies with a note that said, "Remember us." But I don't respond. Because I do remember. I remember who I was when he left me for her. And I remember who I became when I left him for me. So to anyone reading this who's been lied to, abandoned, or broken by the person they trusted most, I want you to know this. You don't need revenge to win. You just need the truth, the courage to act, and the resolve to never let anyone else write your story again. Because the best karma is becoming someone they'll never have access to again.